This video is about the supercharging apocalypse after the eclipse in Vermont in 2024. I took a road trip to Vermont to see the eclipse, and it was extremely cool. But afterwards, the Tesla Superchargers were mobbed like I've never seen them before. Trying to go home after the eclipse, it has been a fucking nightmare leaving. We're limited by the fact that we can't charge the car. This story is a case study in the ways in which electric vehicles still have a long way to go. After having the Tesla for 4 years, this is the biggest shit show I've ever encountered at a supercharger. The eclipse in Vermont has just ended, and there are 50 Teslas ahead of us. They gave me this number, 77, and number 27 is going right now. This is a fucking disaster. We went up into the northeast corner of Vermont chasing the sun. It was really important to get somewhere where there was sun and the clouds are coming in from the west. So we went up into the northeast corner of Vermont, which is pretty sparsely populated. There really isn't much infrastructure up there of any sort. Once we got up there, cell phone service immediately went to shit. At first I thought it was just because we were somewhere remote that maybe didn't have good cell phone coverage, but we literally never really got good coverage again for the rest of the day. It was just there were way too many people up there and the cell phone networks are overwhelmed. We found the perfect spot and the eclipse was insanely cool. And as soon as it ended, as soon as the moon moved even slightly away from the sun and lights started peeking out from the other side, I was out of there. I knew the traffic was gonna be totally fucked, and I wanted to get out like a bat out of hell. But I hadn't planned adequately. I was more concerned about running away from the clouds than I was about getting enough charge in my car before the eclipse started. That I could have done, but I did not do. As soon as the eclipse was over, I went straight to the Supercharger in St. Johnsbury, one of the few superchargers up in that part of Vermont. The strip mall that the Supercharger site was located in, the anchor store had shut down, and they still had a sign for a Radio Shack. This strip mall sucks. I think that means there are not a lot of Teslas who come to this part of Vermont on a daily basis. I don't think this supercharger gets a lot of action. And when we got there, there was more of a backup than anything I've ever seen in my almost 4 years of having a Tesla. There were 50 cars in line ahead of us and more pouring in. There was literally a kid handing out numbers that were handwritten on like a piece of notebook paper. And it was obvious that we were gonna be there for like 5 hours or something. The car couldn't get a good cell phone connection, and my phone wouldn't, and my friend's phone wouldn't. And so I had a very difficult time figuring out if there were other chargers. One of the lessons I've learned from this is that EV charging requires planning. For that, you need the internet. You need to look in advance and see how busy that charging station is, because if it's full, you could be waiting around for hours and you'd wanna make a different decision. Without the internet connection, I can't plan shit. The young woman I was traveling with is from New Orleans, and she has trauma from having to evacuate New Orleans during hurricanes like Katrina. And so this whole situation was triggering for her. I think she's literally afraid of taking a trip in an EV again. I think it was kind of traumatic for her. Me, on the other hand, mostly I saw that long line in St. Johnsbury and I was just like, I don't want to wait 5 hours to get charged. So I thought maybe I could make it across the state to Berlin, Vermont, the next closest supercharger, naively thinking that there wouldn't be traffic there too. And the way I persuaded my friend to try this is I looked up and there were some chargers on Route 2 in the middle. We stopped at a flow charger, which theoretically is a fast charger, and there are also some blink chargers in that same area, which I didn't think would be fast. I assumed that the fast charger at the flow station would work with my Tesla. That was a bad assumption. It turns out that even with the SAE adapter I have, I still couldn't connect the flow charger to my Tesla because that's an SAE combo, something I didn't even really know about before the eclipse. And so without having any other option, we had to plug into the blink charger. The blink chargers work so poorly. I had to go inside this gas station to get Wi-Fi to connect my car to the blink charger, and even then it still wouldn't work. We had to call the phone number and activate the charging that way. Blink chargers are really fucked, and I've had problems with them before. And even so, the blink charger was charging my car at 6 kilowatts, which means that it was over 9 hours to get my car to 80% charge. If you're taking a road trip and trying to get back to New York City that night, that's untenable. It also really drove home the point that fast charging is essential for taking a road trip. If you make the distinction between EV chargers generally and fast chargers, you really need to have a fast charger for a road trip. And for fast chargers, there's only one company that has any solution for this at all that's at all viable, and you know what the answer is. The best thing that Tesla has done, in my mind, is not their cars, it's their charging network. Their competitors don't come close. There is nobody close Some of the competitors suck some serious ass. For all of Tesla's faults, they deserve massive credit for just being light years ahead of their competitors on this front. But even their system has absolutely nothing in place in case these queues develop and in case there's like 20, 30, 50, 100 cars waiting. This is a miniature supercharger shaped cell phone charging stand. I am going to be signing it right now with a gold Sharpie. And I'm going to put it on eBay so you can bid on it. And if somebody wins this on eBay, I will give them executive producer credit in the next video I make after that auction is ended. Thank you for helping me fund this channel. I started to look at the other superchargers in Vermont, and it looked like all the superchargers all over Vermont and down in New Hampshire and up into Canada too all had long wait times like the ones that we experienced in St. Johnsbury. At that same blink charger, other people had just come from the Tesla charger in Berlin, and they said that the exact same thing that was happening in St. Johnsbury. A ridiculous queue of cars that was clearly going to take hours and hours to clear out. I watched other people, non-Tesla owners, come up and try to figure out how to use the flow charger or the blink charger. Doesn't really matter what kind of car you have, just the friction to get these chargers to work at all. There's a steep learning curve. You have to download an app, you need an internet connection, and then like create an account. There's so much friction to get these chargers to work. I watched one guy try to get the blink charger to work in his Tesla and then give up, drive away, and then he came back about half an hour later because there was no other option, and he had burned through whatever charge he had trying to find somewhere else to go. And eventually he got the blink charger working too. And part of the problem is there are too many types of plugs. Sooner or later all EVs need to use the same plug, and Tesla really seems to be the best designed. This SAE combo and CHAdeMO, these really need to go away. After we waited at the blink charger, we charged about 2 hours. At that point we had just completely given up on the idea of going back to New York City. It was too late at night. We went back to the friend's house that we stayed at originally, and clearly we should have just gone there from the start. I plugged in my car to a normal AC outlet in this person's house and got a little bit of a charge overnight. And then in the morning, we went back to the supercharger in Berlin outside of Montpelier, and there was still a little bit of a queue. The charging station was entirely full with more Teslas coming in. I fortunately didn't have to wait really at all. You could see that there had been a huge crowd of Teslas there the night before. I think the charging infrastructure in Vermont was probably overbuilt given the day-to-day demand for people taking road trips in their Teslas like up in the unpopulated northern parts of the state. Maybe they're coming up to take ski trips or whatever. It was entirely unbuilt for just this huge surge of demand. A world full of electric vehicles could mean that in some sort of situation where you have like an evacuation or a ton of people leaving somewhere all at once, where charging infrastructure isn't good or something like that, it could really be a just huge disaster. For EVs to be viable, they're going to need to have better range and be as efficient as possible. My Tesla's rated for over 300 miles of range, and on a road trip, functionally, it probably gets more like, I don't know, 150 miles at the most. If you're charging it to 80% and also driving at 80 miles per hour, your range really dips at those high speeds. The range should really be like double at least what it currently is. They're going to need to not have gigantic batteries that take ages to charge. The Cybertruck gives me great concern. I'm really glad that I didn't see a single Cybertruck trying to charge a 125 kilowatt hour battery at any of these superchargers. That would have been a fucking disaster. And this was the first experience in the entire nearly 4 years of having a Tesla where I felt like maybe gasoline cars should stick around for a while. For me, this whole experience really crystallized the ways in which EVs are still falling short, and we're not yet ready or anywhere close to being ready for a world where everything's an EV. At the moment, gasoline cars still have a huge advantage in some ways. I have more videos about electric vehicles in the works, and I'm making them because at heart, I really am an advocate for electric vehicles and for sustainable energy. And these videos are meant to highlight the ways in which EVs are not yet good enough. I want EVs to get better. I'm rooting for the technology, and that is why I'm making these videos.